late so.
Oh! Here we go. Oh, yeah. I told you. Almost a minute late. Oh! See? We're getting ready for election. Thank you, Maya.
That's
Making me do this every Sunday.
Woo! Here we go. Good morning. Good morning, Timothy. Thank you
Good morning,
for
Maya.
being online and ready to deliver today's briefing. This is Japanese Politics One-on-One, episode 261, the very first episode of the sixth year of this series. And of course, welcome to everybody who is watching us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. It's a pleasure to be with you. And of course, to everybody who is listening to us in Clubhouse. Once again, Japanese Politics One-on-One, where we talk about the latest events in Japanese politics during the week. And today is a very special day. It is election day. It is snowing here in Tokyo. We already have close to 5 centimeters on the ground of snow. And I wonder how this will affect the election results. Of course, I'm sure that you're going to tell us a little bit more about this, Timothy. And, welcome. And let us know what you're going to talk about today, except for the elections, of course.
Thank you very much, Maya, and welcome everybody. Today is February 8th, Election Day, and it's snowing outside. That's a pretty important thing. Here in Tokyo, typically when it snows, it might surprise many of you who are not that familiar, but snow basically closes down the entire city of Tokyo. Not the rest of Japan, because usually they're a little bit more accustomed to it, but today you will see that I am broadcasting from my home office, not from below decks on the good ship Grimm's. It's just too cold, and of course, broadcasting in that kind of weather is not easy, and the web strength is also affected by that. So I'm reporting from my home office, and there is a lot going on. There's a lot to report to you today. And also, last week, as Maya said, was our 5th anniversary. It was the largest audience that we've had on record. So I thank you very much for that. And I also acknowledge that there are a lot of people that are just tuning in for the first time, maybe the second time. So thank you very much for stumbling upon the program. And please know that if you have issues or questions, you want to make a comment, you can feed those to Maya throughout the show, and she will line them up and we can address them in the Q&A. So I'll talk today for about 30 minutes, try and bring you up to speed on what's going on with the election, what we can expect, what's going to happen as a consequence of that, what's going on geopolitically, and try and wrap it up as quickly as possible so that we can get into the real meat and bones of this briefing, which is the Q&A portion. So with that, let me just wrap the opening up, turn it over to you, Maya, and then get into the sequence of issues that are hot on my plate and that I want to engage you in a conversation about. Maya?
Yes, thank you, Timothy. I have a couple of announcements to make, actually. As you know that, we already had the first movie night. So it was in January. And of course, there is another one coming this month. It is going to be on the the last Tuesday of this month. I apologize for being confused with the dates. So, and that last Tuesday is the 24th of February. So please, yes, put that date on your calendar. And we are aiming for Kokuho, the movie that, yes, is... well, it has become a big hit here in Japan. Hopefully, it will still be on screen. Then, if we cannot find a screen where we can watch it, then of course we'll change the movie. But for the moment, it is February 24th. And of course, as you already know, next week, well, 3 days from now, we're going to have a very special guest on the podcast of Wednesday morning, when Mr. Glenn Fukushima is going to be our guest speaker, and we will talk about lessons learned from the past four decades, and also some, let's say, the outlook for the future, because Japan is indeed on an inflection point, as Timothy often says. And there is one more announcement here. You may be You may be familiar with YCAPS. This is an organization that is based in Yokosuka, and it is called Yokosuka Yokosuka Whitecaps. Please forgive me. Center, yes, Yokosuka Center for Asia Pacific Studies, and they're going to hold a seminar about the immigration and immigration control here in Japan. That's going to be on February 16th. So please think about it. And if you have questions, you can look them up on LinkedIn. That's Yokosuka, and you'll find information about the seminar. But it is on the evening of February 16th. So please forgive me for these long announcements. There is a lot of housekeeping today, and I'm trying to do everything all together. And remember to like, subscribe, follow us, and help us spread the word again for these briefings, because we hope that they're helpful, and we have been doing them for quite a while with this in mind, to be helpful for to people who do business in Japan or live here. Timothy, thank you for your patience. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Maya. Those events, the things that you are organizing, dovetail perfectly with the briefing that we provide you every Sunday morning. So our Sunday morning briefings are bite-sized pieces of what happened over the last week and what it means and what it looks like it's going to happen in the near term. And the other events, something from Glenn Fukushima, he's somebody that we all know and admire, is really critical in understanding the bigger picture. And YCAPS is just a collection of a lot of Japan hands and really policy wonks. They have a lot of seminars, and they dovetail very nicely with what we're doing. And thank you very much, Maya, for sponsoring them. Our calendar here, today is not so much about ceremony, it's about consequences. It is an election day. And it's a rather strange situation that we've moved up into. We have the election today, and then it's Monday and then Tuesday. Then we have a national holiday on Wednesday. That's the foundation day. That's the day that the Constitution, the current Constitution of Japan, was executed, and it's a national holiday. So we have 2 days going here. The election will decide who is in the lower house. The 465 seats will be filled tomorrow morning. There'll be a ceremony at the Diet, and all of the people who have won their seats will go into the Diet. They'll have their lapel badge on. And for those people who are new, they'll have their new lapel badge on. Their mothers will be so proud of them. There'll be lots of photographs taken. The emperor will travel across the moat to open the Diet, as he's constitutionally required to. So a lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of fanfare going on there. That's Monday. On Tuesday, you might imagine that business gets really robust and rolling. There might be, an election of the Diet or an appointment of the cabinet, that sort of thing. And then we fall into Wednesday, a national holiday. In fact, none of that is predicted to be happening. The prime minister, the election for prime minister, because that the Diet, as it reconfigures itself, it needs to elect the prime minister yet again. And that vote will not be until the 18th, almost 10 days after the vote is caused. So it's a curious state of affairs that the prime minister has decided, Takaichi, she will have to be reelected by the Diet, and she's pushed that off, not to be immediate, but to be 10 days down the road. It's a curious thing. So we've got a national holiday on Wednesday, and then as we roll over towards the end of the month, just before the movie night, which is on the 24th, we have a 3-day weekend there, and that is due to the emperor's birthday. So that calendar makes sense because this election here is seminal. The election will be decided tonight, and we can make an educated guess about what's going to happen. Yes, the Liberal Democratic Party is going to win big, probably by itself, maybe 50% of the seats it will be able to capture. It is possible that they could, with Ishin as an alliance partner, actually exceed a supermajority or achieve a supermajority. And that is really a very big deal between moving from a majority, which they haven't had. The LDP hasn't had. It's had to cobble itself together With Mr. Suga, it was kind of teetering. Then you had Mr. Kishida, and he didn't have full control of the diet. Mr. Ishiba, for the very limited amount of time that he was prime minister, there was no LDP dominance, and the entire administration was fractured. They couldn't really get anything done, and that evolved into, kicking him out, having him resign, a big controversy there, and an election for prime minister yet again with, as we all know, Ms. Takaichi coming up to the front. So she's been prime minister for 3 months, called a snap election. That's not something that any of us anticipated. None of the pundits were anticipating that she would call for an election, a snap election, so quickly. And as a consequence of that, she's pulled off a master plan. This is the shortest. I mean, there are so many things that are going in her favor. It's the shortest election period in post-war history. It comes at a time where the opposition parties don't have the chance, they don't have the opportunity to coalesce their forces. And in fact, it forced the largest opposition party, the Constitutional Democratic Party, to quickly hold hands with the Komeito, which just leaped out of an alliance with the LDP after 26 years. So they're kind of floating around. The prime minister calls for an election, and both of these parties are thinking, well, now what are we going to do? And they formed a union. They formed a new party, very unusual step. And I think that they will suffer as a consequence of that. Voters, it hasn't had enough time to mature, to ripen, to form its own kind of aroma and feel. Voters are going to be confused. And so as a consequence of these things, some of it is just timing, some of it is just maybe happenstance, but you've got to give it to this prime minister. She has really pulled this off. And so what I want to focus on today is the election and how the election is going to open up opportunities for Japan to be more expressive, more resilient, more perhaps self-reliant. In the prime minister's stump speeches, you keep hearing her talk about Japan's self-reliance. And so that really makes a resonant voice within Japan. So as I said, there are 465 seats, and those seats, I hate to kind of belabor it, but those seats are selected in two systems. They run in parallel. One is the single seat district, and this is where a person, by their own name, volition, hi, my name is Sato, vote for me because I'm a good guy and my dad was a doctor, and vote for me. And people go into the election booths and they vote. That's about 60% of the 465 seats. And so it's one seat for one district. And so in the neighborhoods, you'll see these billboards that have the pictures of the candidates. There's usually not more than 6, because there are 6 or 7 political parties where candidates are running, and you might have an independent running. So they'll have their own block there too. But there's not a whole lot of candidates in each particular seat. And the more you have, the more fractured that vote can become. That's the single district seats. And then layered on top of that is the proportional representation seats. So when somebody goes into the voting booth, they vote for the person. I liked Sato. He was really, really articulate, and he's with the party that I feel more affinity. So I'm going to put his name down, and you must write his name. You have to write it by hand, and it's got to be the exact kanji characters that are on the ballot. And if it's not, then that becomes invalidated. They have another ballot for the proportional representation. And proportional representation is you vote for the party. So you vote for the individual, and then you vote for the party that you like. And that really benefits, one of the other benefits that the LDP and Ms. Takaichi have is that the LDP has a good, strong brand now. It resonates. It is not fractured. The Ishin party brand is a little bit fractured. It comes from Osaka. There are 2 heads. One is the former governor of Osaka. He's running for re-election today. He and the mayor are running for re-election today. They'll be decided today. They'll more than likely both of them win, but it's a bit fractured. Komeito was 26 years with the LDP. Now it's kind of kissed up to the former Constitutional Democratic Party. So when you go on TV or when you're positioning yourself for that party as that party's candidate, you've got these two faces of old guys who are kind of amalgamating their philosophies. It just doesn't resonate very well. So once again, it benefits the LDP. So the LDP, actually all of the parties, for the proportional representation, they have complete power to put on the list the whose names are there. So if the candidates are, if the party gets lots of votes, then the numbers are diminished from the top of the list. So if you're at the bottom of the list, your possibility of being elected on the proportional representation is very low. So you want to cajole and convince the party that you're a good, solid person and that you should be up high on the list. So this is important. That's almost 40%, 38% of the lower house vote consists of proportional representation. And the reason why I think the prime minister felt a little bit emboldened is because the LDP brand is strong, it's resilient. Even though the polls indicate that the appreciation of the population is not as high as it is for the prime minister. But still, she's the prime minister, she's the leader of the LDP, so it kind of propels it that way, even though the LDP might not be that strong. So the interesting thing about the proportional representation is you can be a member running on your own name recognition, but also convince the LDP to put you, or the party, to put you on the proportional representation too, just in case you don't win here on the proportional representation, you might win. But either way, you're a politician, so you want to cover your bets. That's really interesting. It's this list of people who are on both of the single seat district list and the proportional representation list. When they lose here but they win here, they're called zombie members of the diet. They actually suffer a little bit of a diminution in the level of respect because they weren't successful here, but they got in by the skin of their teeth, and only because the party had a better reputation than they did. This explanation is important to you because you would not imagine that the former prime minister, Mr. Ishiba, who has run in Totori number one, throughout his career and won, he is running as a single seat candidate there. You would think it's fine, he's going to win. He was former prime minister. He has actually convinced the LDP to put him on the proportional representation list too. Wow, why would you do that? That just shows you're hedging your bets, you don't feel very confident, and I think there's probably a lot of negative energy that's still devoted to him. Suga, Kishida, then Ishiba, and during the Kishida-Ishiba transition, it was just, for the LDP, it was just a disaster. So you can imagine that Mr. Ishiba is not feeling very, very confident. In fact, 3 of his lieutenants similarly were put on the list by the LDP. They were put at the bottom of the list by Miss Takaichi. So that's politics in action. That, some people might call that revenge or payback, but that's really something to observe. So this election is really seminal in reestablishing the LDP, and I think the LDP and I think Ms. Takaichi will be successful in that. And you're going to watch that tonight. So the televisions will be reporting on the election campaigns, how the numbers are floating in. You'll have a pretty good sense of it. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. By about 6 o'clock, I think the temperature will be rising. Ms. Takaichi will be in party headquarters and getting pictures taken, pointing at the names of candidates on the walls who are winning, and also the votes that are going. The other thing to kind of keep your eye on is that Ms. Takaichi, when she ran in Nara number 2 in the last election, so the last election for the lower house, that was triggered by Mr. Ishiba, you remember? Triggered by Mr. Ishiba. As soon as he got into office as prime minister, he said he wouldn't do it, and he did it. He called a snap election. She got about 125,000 votes. So 125,000, a little bit more than that. Let's see what she does today, okay? let's see if her this was when she was just a diet member. She wasn't she was a candidate for prime minister, but she did pretty well there. That's a strong mandate. Let's see how that number is reflected tonight. And similarly, keep your eye on what's going on with Mr. Ishiba, because that contrast will tell you a lot of what the underlying story is within the LDP. So we're here as Japan Hands, as a collection of people who are in love with this country and want to study it and figure it out and do business here and be successful here. It's a difficult country to be successful in. It's not a difficult country to exist in, but to be successful as a company or as an individual, it does take a certain amount of finesse. And similarly with politics, you know, watching this and understanding how that develops will teach you a lot and will help get you better integrated into what's going on. So if the LDP secures half of the 465 seats and has a majority, we won't be dealing with this. They need to have somebody glom on and they need to convince Ishin or maybe Mr. Tamaki, would you please vote for us because we have to pass this. That is a thing of the past. We're not going to go back there again. And I think you can also anticipate whatever the outcome is. I think the LDP will do very well. But I think more importantly, the LDP will secure a majority. And with Ishin, it could even have a supermajority. So with a supermajority, that means that all of the committee chairs within the lower house belong to their party. So if it's a supermajority, certainly the LDP will have to reward Ishin with some committee seats. But since they're in something of an alliance, and in fact, maybe the reason why the prime minister is saying, I don't want to have the election for prime minister until the 18th of February, is because she needs to figure out what the cabinet position is going to be and how Ishin needs to be rewarded. That might take some time and some horse trading. As it stands right now, probably, you know, the cabinet that she had before she closed down the house, it's fine, should stick with that. So there shouldn't be any big changes. But this election here, it's not about ceremony, it is about structural projection. Japan is really establishing itself. It's going into kind of a horse stance, and it is going to position itself for resilience and for stability and for reliability. When I say reliability, I mean that Japan is a fixture in this region. It is reliable. It can project its own strength. It doesn't need to ask anything above and beyond from the United States. We are building up our own resources to be a standalone country. It takes a while. It takes quite a while, but we're moving in that direction. And I think what's going to happen today will secure Miss Takaichi as a long-term prime minister. She could, you know, exceed even what Mr. Abe did as the longest-serving prime minister. It is that much of a seminal issue that we're addressing now, and she is not the right. She's not the same kind of prime minister that we've had in the past. So there's a lot to look forward to. So this election is really important. It is also important for Ishin. So in this alliance between the LDP and Ishin, they didn't really form a formal alliance. The Ishin did not join the government, and they also didn't kind of parse some of the district seats so that you take this seat, we won't run a candidate like they did with Komeito. With Komeito, Komeito was given different districts. We're not going to run a candidate there, and we're going to tell our voters to vote for you. So in the proportional representation seat, we will tell our members to vote for you as the party of choice. So that's why Komeito has a large portion of their party seats are on the proportional list, not the dynamic person who's got a flair and got a reputation and has a lot of money. Komeito isn't quite like that. So that's why Ishin really wanted to force the LDP to promise reduce the number of seats of the Diet by 10% and focus exclusively on proportional representation because they detest Komeito. They want to take all of Komeito's seats. we'll see how that fleshes out. But even in Osaka, where it is strong, it hasn't kind of convinced the LDP to give up those seats and run someplace else, and we won't challenge you there. It's a drag out fight. So the LDP and Ishin are going head to head. In the recent past, even currently, the Ishin dominates the politics inside Osaka City, inside Osaka Prefecture, inside the Kansai region. Predominantly, there are LDP members in the upper house and proportional representation and in single seats, but it's dominated almost exclusively by Ishin. Let's see how that shakes out this time. The more important issue is, does a supermajority be achieved? And if it's just a little bit shy of a supermajority, who is the LDP going to bring in to achieve that supermajority? The supermajority is important for a lot of different reasons. The LDP doesn't have a majority. It's not even close to a majority in the upper house. So the upper house can stymie, it can block different bills that are being passed. I think this prime minister, most of us already know this. Work. We're going to work for you. We're going to change Japan. We're going to build Japan up. We're going to work our asses off for you, the voters. And I think if you watch the politics, if there is a supermajority that is achieved by Ishin and the LDP, they can override any opposition that the upper house might have. So bills typically are passed in one house or the other, and then they go to the other house to be chewed up, spit out, voted on. And if both of them can agree, then it becomes a law. If the lower house has a bill and it passes it to the upper house, and the upper house says, no, we don't like that because you don't have a majority and it's a bill that's going to benefit you and not us, and you didn't do enough horse trading, so we're not going to vote for it. It goes back to the lower house, and if there's a supermajority, if there's 2/3, it can override that opposition in the upper house. So this is a really critical thing. If this is achieved, Japan will change before our eyes. You will see Japan on greased skids that it hasn't had since Mr. Abe. So that's been a long time coming. So I think we need to watch that very carefully. So the question is, how did we get here? How did this kind of evolve? And I think part of that is missteps of the opposition parties, Constitutional Democratic Party and Komeito, forming together. Also, maybe Mr. Tamaki and the Democratic Party for the People not really, being too aggressive in trying to grab what they want. Ishin no Kai, kind of, they're split. They don't have real leadership that is defined and attractive and photogenic for them. They might have done a better job at that. Similarly with Komeito and the Constitutional Democratic Party, rather than having two talking heads and old people, changing that up. But part of that is the dynamics. Part of it is just the timing. They didn't have the time to really coalesce their voter base and the organization. A campaign like the one that we have in a very short period of time, the shortest in post-war history, the winner will be that who has the better brand, who has the better organization, who has the candidates who are loaded and ready to go. They know what the manifesto, they know what the policy speeches are. In this particular campaign, policy was not that much of an issue. The opposition parties wanted to talk about let's diminish the consumption tax so that we can support the voters. Let's do things like that, and we don't want a revision of the Constitution. And Ms. Takaichi, she's really far on the right, and she won't even talk about certain issues. So that was their talking point. Whereas Ms. Takaichi and the LDP are rather focused on stability, on forming a stable economy, on being fiscally responsible. So that theme, I think, has been repeated over and over. And I think her decision to spring this election caught everybody off guard. So part of it are those components, but the other part, gosh, it's the weather. Just look outside if you're here in Japan or in Tokyo. I know we have maybe 2/3 of our audience is overseas, but it's continuing to show snow right now. And when the weather is inclement, and it is now, it's February. It's February is the worst, the coldest month in Japan. Except for the committed voters, most people they'd rather stay home, or it's cold, it's wet, it's difficult to get out. But for the committed voters, for Komeito, for the people who vote for Komeito, they're generally committed voters, but they're confused right now. They don't know what's going on with their party or their philosophy, or who is their leadership. But for the LDP, they see an opportunity to reassert themselves. So the LDP, you can anticipate, will come out swinging. They'll come out strong. The other interesting thing about this election is that the youth are really appreciative, more generally than in the past, of the LDP of Ms. Takaichi. So they've done polls over the last couple of weeks, and Japanese politics is really propelled by polls. So that's why the polling is very sophisticated here. Young people between the ages of 18 and 28 are voting more. They're actually going to the polls, and they're more conservative than they were in the past. If you include 18 to 38 and add another 10 years there, it diminishes a little bit, but it does tell you that the younger generation of Japanese people are a little bit more engaged in politics. They're a little bit more willing to go out and actually cast a vote to participate in the process. And this is something that's new. So as we report, we've been doing this for 5 years, Maya. As we've been doing this, we have noticed, you can see this change, this evolution of Japan, not just economically, but also culturally, politically. There has been a shift that's been going on. And I think when we have this kind of click of the election dynamics tonight, I think you're going to be able to see an acceleration there. So it's not going to be a pivot. It's just going to be kind of an acceleration. And I think we know where we're going. It's not an ideological shift by the electorate. It's a structural outcome. It's something that has been building, and it's I guess it's something that you just can anticipate. So from the personal perspective, the prime minister over this last week, she had 40 stump speeches in this very limited period of time. She's on fire. I mean, you've got to admire somebody like that. In addition to that, she still has a flow of foreign visitors that come in. So it's been a pretty important week for her. In addition to being an election campaign, the CEO of TSMC, I think you might know who I'm talking about. TSMC is the chips producer in Taiwan. They've decided to build a huge factory, a wafer fab in Kumamoto, and also one in Arizona. So they're trying to hedge their bets. They are all of the high-end stuff is still done in Taiwan, but they're moving some of their manufacturing outside of Taiwan just in case, and they're getting a lot of support for that. But he came in to visit with the prime minister on an expansion of what's going on in Kumamoto. So there was a lot of news about that, and it's a big deal for some. I mean, this is the wealthiest company in Asia, TSMC. Everybody wants a piece of that, and they want to have TSMC maybe devote some of the higher end production in their countries too. I think they're not going to do that, but the 3 nano wafer technology that they're developing now, I think that is moving on stream. I think that's what they discussed this time. This fits in nicely with what the prime minister has said about defense, about infrastructure, about AI, about moving manufacturing back to Japan. So we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. The other thing that happened this week that's, gosh, it's really, really something else, is that Donald Trump endorsed on Thursday Takaichi as prime minister. She is really strong. She is a good leader. Who does that? How? I don't know. He's probably done that once before. He's endorsed a foreign leader. I think it was in Italy, but an endorsement from him. You've seen it in American politics. When a candidate gets their endorsement, their chances of winning are enhanced terrifically. But globally, for him to do that, that tells you something. That tells you that the United States is reliant on Japan. It is kind of delegating to Japan. Stand up, we will support you. We'll be with you. We understand the yen is a problem. 2 weeks ago, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, did make some comments. The yen really strengthened. We experimented with that. It wasn't quite the outcome that we wanted. It's now hovering here, but we got your back, and we're going to be doing things together. I think you're going to see that more often. I think for the United States, having a strong and stable Japan is very important. Having a Japan that is on good speaking terms with South Korea, that's also important. There's been great inroads that have been made there. The president of South Korea visited in Nara with the prime minister maybe 3 weeks ago, almost a week together. So that is beginning to go, even though there's still a lot of tension there. But that's a big deal for the president of the United States to make an endorsement of a candidate right in the campaign period too. So there's a lot going on there. So also the decision by Mr. Ishiba to put his name on the proportional representation seat, in addition to running as his own on the volition of his own reputation, it's also a very telling thing. So you can see that there's some tension going on within the LDP. He was prime minister, he was leader of the LDP, and now he's being short shifted. And the three lieutenants that he had, she has put them at the bottom of the proportional list. So there's something going on there. So what we are watching now, she is a prime minister without a faction. This hasn't happened in post-war history. Everybody's had a faction. Mr. Ishiba had a faction. Mr. Kishida, Mr. Suga, they all had a faction, even though during the Kishida administrations, the factions basically were disbanded. Mr. Ishiba disbanded his faction. Mr. Kishida disbanded his faction. But she has never been one who has belonged to a faction. So there is an opportunity here. She's not beholden. She is beholden to Mr. Aso, of course, but the dynamics here tell you that this is ripe for a real generational change, and it's something that I think you need to be prepared for. And the enormity of it and the magnitude of it, I think we won't know until maybe 6 or 8 o'clock tonight. But that's something that we're going to be watching. The other thing that came up this week is that Donald Trump invited Ms. Takaichi to visit in mid-March, I think March 18th, somewhere around there. And as a state guest, I don't know if the prime minister can be a state guest in a visit to the United States. I think only the emperor can be a state visitor. I'm not sure about that, but she is the leader of the parliament, but that doesn't mean she's the head of state. I think that title goes to the emperor. But there is some discussion about her going as a state visitor or quasi-state visitor. I think she will get high marks there, and this is maybe 3 weeks before the president is scheduled to go to China. So initially there was some discussion about him coming to Japan and then going to China on the same leg, and they've diminished that now. China will get its own leg. It'll probably be just a solo trip there, a very important trip for the United States, very important to Japan too. And the fact that the president is inviting the prime minister to the United States for something like a state visit before China is, I think, something that's going to put a lot of wind in the sails of the LDP and in the prime minister. So once again, there's a lot going in her favor. You'll see the tea leaves. You'll be able to read it just as well as anybody else tonight. So keep tuned to that. Let's turn to the yen. The yen is now sitting at 157 yen to the dollar. It was at 155 or 154 just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And so there's a lot of sloppiness here, volatility that's going on. This having the yen at this price is helpful to exporters, but it's very detrimental to households, to people who, are paying for things maybe in yen, but they're transitioned into dollars. Energy is almost completely dominated by foreign inputs. Japan does produce some energy, but the vast majority of it needs to be imported. Also, foodstuffs, as we all know, Japan is only 60% self-sufficient in food, so it has to import that. But also, just lots of goods and services are dominated in dollar exchanges. So, Japan, the households, the workers, they feel diminished as a result of that, and it's not a good time to have an election. That's why the supplemental budget was passed 3 months ago by Ms. Takaichi to kind of help the people, the voters, deal with this. But no matter what happens, I think the volatility of the yen, it's going to hover. It seems like this natural zone is 157, 156, 158. But if it goes 160, 159, 160, I think the Japanese policymakers are going to be forced to move on that and actually support the yen. That's not something that people generally like. The United States has poo-hooed that and said, don't artificially inflate your value. And so I think we'll be moving into a situation where the United States, the reason why the yen is at its value now is because the US dollar is strong. And so as a consequence, the yen, there's a dynamic there. So for the short term, I think the yen is going to continue to be in that direction and volatile. But if we see like sudden drops or just partial recoveries, then you might see intervention by the Japanese government. But let's see how that works out. So moving forward, let me see what else we've got on the list of things to talk about. Moving on. Sorry for the hesitation. Where are we now? The other thing is yes, supporting the yen is the price of food and how they pay for the food, but also the wages of the workers. So the, it's going to become a hotter and hotter issue. People ask me all the time, what about foreigners? And what about, Miss Takaichi? And she's a little bit more to the right. And doesn't she diminish the role of foreigners? And don't they want to tap down on that? And it is true. I have noticed it too, that you're getting a little bit of a look askance from certain quarters that you didn't get in the past. But I think it's only just a retweaking. The number of foreigners in Japan has exceeded, I think it's exceeded 3% now, and the number of workers in foreign workers in Japan is around 1.5%. So that's a big number. The number of people in Japan is diminishing. The number of foreigners who are coming in is increasing, and also the number of people who have come to live here, who have established a residence here, has increased. And I think maybe it's causing just a little bit of indigestion. It's too strong. It's too quick at a time when the economy is not doing particularly well. And it's not just foreigners from Europe or the United States or Canada. I mean, it's foreign workers from all over the world. And I think what you're going to see with the administration after the election is, yes, there's going to be a retuning of how they distribute visas, what visa qualifications are consisting of, what's the term of length for a stay for tourists, or also for temporary workers, or for workers who are on work study, that sort of thing. But it is going to go through a change. People ask me, are you really worried about this? I'm somewhat concerned, but I'm not that worried about it. It is and the parties have been talking about it. The opposition parties, non-LDP parties, have been talking about it on stump speeches, that we need to work on this. But I think everybody understands that the population is declining. People aren't having children as they once had, and that filler has got to be qualified foreigners to come in and fill that gap. Otherwise, the GDP of Japan is just going to continue to fall. There's not much they can do about energy. They have started one of the nuclear reactors. It started up last week after 13 years of being mothballed. They started it, it ran for 2 days, it started to have alarm bells, they turned it off. They've gone back into it and are looking to restart it. But Japan needs to come back with an energy mix that is self-supporting. They don't produce oil. They can produce nuclear. There is a nuclear allergy that's here, but I think we're moving beyond that. And with a majority or a supermajority in the parliament, I think you're going to see that shift continue much more. You know, the reliability of nuclear is unmistakable, and you know, Japan needs to be more resilient, and it can't just depend on imported energy sources. It's just not it's not a mixture that Japan can propel itself forward on, and it really needs to. You're going to see a more resilient Japan coming forward. China continues to be a bit of a thorn. It is still punishing Japan because of the remarks of Ms. Takaichi about, you know, if there were to be a kinetic action against Taiwan, then it would be a existential threat to Japan, and we would need to participate. We would need to be engaged in that because our livelihood depends on a free-flowing trade within this region, and a war between China and Taiwan is going to diminish that. And China got really upset about that, and so they're still excluding exports. They're still kind of ramping up the challenges to the borders and to the airways. But this is grown to be kind of the new normal. I think over the last 2 weeks, there's been no big news from North Korea, thankfully. Usually when there's something that comes up of global impact, for example, Davos or the Olympics or something like that, the North Koreans come up and say, don't forget about me. This is what I'm doing. Hey, look at me. There hasn't been much of that. And the activities that have been going on with China challenging this, the South Pacific and the Philippines and the disputed islands, it continues, but it hasn't been, it's just a new normal, I think, that they're trying to establish here. Maybe it's a strong strategic posture to always keep your options open and keep people on their toes and establish a new normal so that when you do move, it was just a training exercise and then everything happens. But Japan is not preparing for war. It is preparing for internal militarization, but this is framed as self-reliance. And there's no way, I think, that Japan can go into a draft. They can train the young kids to become soldiers. It's not that. Japan is not preparing for the war. It's preparing to not be surprised. And so that's, I think, the push of what the military-industrial complex is currently in Japan. And with the supermajority, you can anticipate that there will be some movements very quickly hoisted for a change of revision of the Constitution. It won't be Article 9 right away, but it will start that process. It's never been touched. It's never been revised. The Constitution that we have now, Constitution Day is on Wednesday, the founding. It's never been touched. There's no country in the world that has had a constitution untouched for that long period of time that has the position and the economic weight that Japan does. So it's really remarkable. And I think, you know, if you know Japanese politics, you know that the LDP was established on the concept that we will change the constitution. So that's been one of the driving forces of Japan. So anyway, I want to wrap this up. We've got the Olympics going on. There are about 120 athletes from Japan. There are more than 200 from Canada and the United States. China has just a little bit south of that. But Japan is going to do well in those fields that it's always done well. Let me see. It's ice skating, speed skating, long distance speed skating, snowboarding. They've been doing snowboarding in half pipes over the last couple of days, and figure skating. They've been doing really well there. But the events that Japan will do well at are not kind of glomped together. They're kind of spread out. It's a 16-day series of events. And so the medal ceremonies, when they start, they'll continue throughout the entire time. But it's basically a 2-week period. It's going to dominate the news. It's going to dominate television, and people are going to be talking about it. But the thing that's very interesting about this Olympics, and it's interesting from the perspective of Japanese politics, is that this Olympics is not fraught with terrorism. It's not fraught with overburdened security, people walking around with submachine guns and Uzi and that sort of thing. You can see that there's been a dramatic shift here. The items of terrorism and hostage taking and kidnapping and bombings, it seems as if it's a thing of the past. Certain long-term positions and resources and investments were made to diminish that, and I think it's not like it was in the recent past. So we can not rest on that kind of security, but it is something that you should take note of, is that this Olympics, it's supposed to bind the world together. It's supposed to be a celebration of athleticism and art and beauty, and it is a different kind of Olympics than we've had in the recent past. So I think a lot can be said for how the market is moving in that direction, and I think it's a good thing, and it's a reflection on just the state of the world, in spite of the fact that we've got several wars that are going on or potentially going on. Anyway, I've gone on and on. Maya, I can hear you drumming your fingers and waiting to get back on track. So I apologize for talking so much, but let's wrap it up and go to the Q&A, where we'll have lots more heat and light rather than me blabbering on. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy. Okay, well, we start with a couple of questions that came earlier this week, all right, to the previous episode. And one of them is actually about Miss Takaichi's, they say love, but okay, preference for South Korea over China. And well, the person says, Donald, that's Donald Seekins, he says, she certainly does not like China. The Moonies are Sanae-san's Achilles heel, and I wonder if there will be a surprise scandal about this on the eve of the election. If there isn't one, that exposes a major flaw in the Japanese political system. In other words, Japan under the LDP is about the same as China under the CPC, censorship of the media. So,
yeah, that's that happens. That's politics. There is kind of a sleeping scandal with the Prime Minister and the Unification Church. I don't think it's a very serious one. It has been kind of kept quiet, but I think it's been kept quiet because it's really not that serious. It's somebody from the Unification Church attending some of her Benkyokai and paying for the tickets. There hasn't been a full expose, although Bunshun is really attempting to try to beat that drum. It didn't really succeed on the campaign trail. Some people wanted to bring it up. The Prime Minister has ignored it, and it's been just basically pushed into the background. So what you're saying is likely true. It's being manipulated, it's being managed. But I think anybody in politics, if they have the opportunity, they're going to ramp it up and they're going to try and expose it. And for the party in power, they want to diminish it and keep it quiet and, pay attention over here and not over here. That's politics, but it's always good to observe those sort of things.
yeah, and it could be concerning as well, depending on the situation in the country
Right.
and the region as well, right? So, yes, we are grateful for such voices as well. And moving on to this morning, we've got, of course, the very first person who always comments is Byron. Byron, thank you very much for your comments and questions, because they help us, well, have a different perspective, I believe.
Well, they help us
All right, we
focus
start.
on some of the issues. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Okay, the first one, it is a comment and a question. And Byron writes, Prime Minister Takaichi called a general election hoping for a supermajority, assuming she gets that supermajority, and if two-thirds majority is needed, for instance, to remove Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, then a parliamentary whip will have to be issued to LDP and its allies to vote for that.
Yep.
But the party itself is far from united on such existential matters. What if a significant number of Diet members of LDP and its allies defy such whip? What options does Prime Minister Takaichi have then?
Okay, so I think it's a little bit too early to be having this conversation. In the first place, I don't think she envisioned a supermajority when she called for the snap election. Just a majority will be fine. Thank you very much. And if we have to hold our nose and have some sort of an alliance with Ishin, as long as we have a majority, but you know the dynamics that have happened have risen the prospect of it being a supermajority. So that's I think that's just something that happened. It's maybe not by design, but it's just by luck. But with a referendum, yeah, the LDP typically in these kinds of matters, they vote en bloc. And if you don't vote en bloc, if you don't toe the line, no matter what you said on a stump speech or with your constituency, or maybe you're from Hiroshima, and so you must renounce any effort to change the Constitution, Article 9, because you'll be voted out of office. That's what you have to do. You're a party member, and the reason why you're a member of the parliament is because of the party. So you better vote, and you better not step out of line. And if there was some sort of revolt by a significant number, then the prime minister would say, "Look, let's ask the people. Let's have an election on this." So that's not going to happen for quite a while. And I think this prime minister, she has already been seen as somebody who is punishing those who aren't towing the line. Look at what's happened with Mr. Ishiba and the lieutenants that he had on his side. They're pushed to the bottom of the proportional representation list. She hasn't kicked them off. She's supported them. They are LDP members. They're likely to win, but she's not helping them at all. So she will extract her price if you're not going to toe the line. She is a tough cookie, as Dan Harada said. She is no picnic. She knows she's a tough individual, and she is, she's expanding her wings. She's getting comfortable with this position, and I predict if this election goes her way, she'll be a long-term politician, and she'll become more resilient, and she'll have bigger wings, and she'll have a better carrying capacity. She'll have somebody in the United States that's got her back. That's a good combination to have.
It is indeed, but at the same time, I think that there is also that possibility of her overreaching, right? Yeah. And if that happens, maybe there will be some forces within the LDP that will eventually resist that overreach.
Well, it's funny because even Mr. Aso, Tada Aso, said in a speech the other day, thank God we don't have Komeito holding us back and making us say and do things that now we're free. We don't need to do that anymore. So I think this pent up energy, as you say, this overreaching, I think it's a natural consequence. I think we will go there. And the question is, how tolerant are we? Are the foreigners who live here? Are the companies that do business here? How much acceptance can you take of this kind of overreaching? And also the Japanese, we're not the dominant factor here. We might complain about it, and it might be an issue, but it's really the voters. Does Japan want to, assume that more right-wing philosophy of, in this region, in this volatile region, not having the complete backing and confidence of the United States is going to be there when you need them? What do we do in that situation? Do we rely on the peace constitution, or do we kind of, prepare for that kind of eventuality? That's, I think, the real critical question. So we will know that within the next maybe 10 months, I think. That decision that will start filtering out, and it'll become somewhat obvious over the next couple of months. But yeah, I think it's something to watch very carefully.
Right. Yes. Okay, one more question from last week because we are on this topic now. So the person who is called Leonardo Stari says, isn't okay, how about the type of alliances between the LDP and other parties? And he asks, isn't the type of alliance that Ishin and LDP had be healthier for the two parties rather than bickering there and
Yeah,
thinking about small stuff? So that,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, but it's kind of difficult still, obviously.
So so there's always a trade-off, and we know what Ishin wants. Ishin wants a reduction of the seats so that their opposition is diminished, and thereby the guess is they will be stronger. They're a regional power, they want to be a national power. So that's step one. Step number two is we want Osaka to be the fallback capital. Should something happen to Tokyo, we want it to be clear, and we already have the infrastructure, because if this decision is made, infrastructure and the receptacles for assuming that role will start being built and exercised. So we want Osaka to be acknowledged as the second capital. We're going to do what we need to do by making the Osaka a metropolitan like Tokyo is. It's not a city and then a prefecture. We're going to build those together, and that's what this referendum is in Osaka today. We're going to know what the voters have decided. I think it's the third time the governor has put his name on the line. If I don't win my governorship, then that means that the people of Osaka don't want Osaka to be the second capital. So he's got a lot riding on that. But I think, yeah, there's horse trading to be had, and sometimes you hold your nose because on the smaller issues you can give up on it. But yeah, it's not a full blown dictatorship. Although a lot of people in the LDP would like that. Can we have it back the way it was with Mr. Tanaka, Kakue Tanaka, when we were ruling the seas? But yeah, at least having to share some of the power. Um, you know, Ishin will be a minor participant in any event. It's not the dog wagging the tail. Um, it is the tail being wagged by the LDP dog.
Right. Okay, and along these lines, the second question from Byron. He says, with voters likely to reject the last-minute alliance of Kumaito and the
Yeah,
Democratic Party of Japan into the CRA and reduce its total members of parliament, might it also be a possibility that some of even the successful CRA candidates might cross over
yeah,
into the DPFP? That is actually a breakaway party formed by former old Democratic Party of Japan members. That would catapult the DPFP
yeah,
Tamaki into the major or a major opposition party capable of proposing
yeah.
new legislation and new policies, not merely opposing the LDP. What are your thoughts on this, Timothy?
Yeah, that's a stretch. So the Constitutional Democratic Party and Komeito together hold 167 seats. They're likely to lose 50% of that in this election. Okay? That's huge. So those seats that are not going to Komeito, they're not going to the Constitutional Democratic Party, are likely going to Mr. Tamaki's group, but Tamaki is predicted to stay at status quo, not exceed more than the 28 seats that he already has. Most of them they might go to Sanseito, but I think they'll mostly go to the LDP. After the election, and the remaining members of this amalgamation of Komeito and the Constitutional Democratic Party, the remaining forces there, yeah, they'll have seats. So why would they change parties since they have a seat until the next election? It's more like that. Yeah, to secure their own personal position, they would want to make that alliance stronger and more cohesive, rather than jumping to, the next pretty girl at the dance. I don't see that as a really viable opportunity. But you never know. It's politics. It's Japanese politics. So my God, we report on this every week, Maya, and from week to week, the level and the angle of change has been very drastic. When we first started it didn't feel like that, but currently every week is just a new story.
Indeed. Okay, thank you for this. And moving on to a couple of comments. The first one comes from Keizawa Sensei. So
Okay.
young people tend not to trust the old media and instead rely heavily on social media and platforms like YouTube. I believe the reason younger generations are responding to Takaichi is that she presents clear and easily understandable benchmarks that resonate with them. Traditional politicians often engage in behind the scenes maneuvering, making their actions and intentions unclear. By contrast, Takaichi's policies are open and transparent, and this clarity is what I think matters most to the young voters. And then we've got Tomoko-san's "This dissolution and general election features several unprecedented elements: a remarkably short campaign period, a dissolution before the budget is passed, and unusually high approval ratings for the Prime Minister. At the very least, public interest is strong, and even generations that had previously been disengaged from politics are now paying attention.
Yeah.
I see this as a positive development."
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing this. And also Tomoko-san writes, more than 20 million people have already cast early ballots, an increase of 26% compared with the previous election. Yeah, this is a big change, a big shift indeed, showing interest in what is happening and the outcome as well. And moving on to another question here from Kylie Pang. So good morning, Kylie. Thank you for joining. The question is, how much room does any new Japanese government really have to improve ties with China, given public opinion, Taiwan contingencies, and alliance expectations with the United States?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it depends on what Trump is able to achieve in his visit in April. So March will be with Takaichi visiting the United States. The next month, I think 3 weeks later, the president will go to China. It is possible he could cut a deal, and this animosity, this competition, this ramping up could be diminished, or it could be, status quo. You just never know. But it is one of the thorns in the side of the international community. This animosity, this potential for China to move on Taiwan. It would disrupt everything, and it looks like that's the direction they're going. So that has resulted in the buildup of forces throughout the Asia-Pacific region, centered largely, but not exclusively, on Japan. So if Japan wants a role in establishing that, being the fulcrum, it can grab that mantle. But if it doesn't want to, if it wants to maintain the peace constitution, then it can choose that too. And I think that choice has been made. And I think that's the direction that we can anticipate going to. And like we said, there is a reason for the animosity between China and Japan. And does it need to be that way? It would be nice if it wasn't, because just think of how much energy and how much resources would be released as a consequence of that. But like in many things, it's a spiritual and a psychological discussion, not totally a political one.
Yeah, my biggest concern at the moment is that we miss people like Nikai Sensei, or the politician who was very much very supportive of establishing economic relations with China, right, and business relationships and everything. Because by doing that, he and his supporters within the LDP as well, they ensured that the two countries while being interdependent, they were going to work towards peace and resolving
Yep.
any differences between them, right? And he's not in in the parliament anymore. We don't know whether any of his supporters back then are still there, but it doesn't seem that there are any thoughts like that nowadays. And honestly, it is a concerning thing because we know that China, of course, you know, they have their own interests, they want to achieve their own goals. Japan does too, of course, but there should be a common ground there between the two countries to work together instead of just opposing each other and fighting with each other. But yeah, okay, please let me move on to the next question, which is once again related to China. So somebody with this sweet handle name on YouTube, Eat Carpet, says, why do you think Takaichi is so extremely anti-China? Is it just for domestic consumption to increase the military budget, or is there anything else?
No, I think it's the geopolitics and her training and upbringing. You know, there are basically three centers of gravity. There's the United States, there's China, there's Russia, and the alignment of how companies and countries work together and how they trade and their geopolitical situation, you know, where their geography is, really dictates that. You would think that Japan, given its geography, would be closer to China or the Asian continent, and it's not. But it's not because of what happened 70 years ago. So that whole dynamic is it's a little bit unnatural. It's a little bit out of kilter, but it is what we have. And I think people need to, you know, choose their sides in a kind of race for dominance, and that's what we're in. You can see China very aggressively attempting to capture the AI market and also the military market and to establish domain over their region. And that wasn't always the case with China, but now they're flush with money. They're producing goods for the entire world. They're a manufacturing powerhouse, and they have a lot of money that's flowing into them. So they've spent, you know, more than I think probably 8% of their GDP on military armament, and that, you know, for an economy like that, that's a lot. So they're able to do and project a lot of things that other countries are unable to do. But the United States is in the same boat. You know, the United States has the largest military in the world by far. So they want to, you know, exert their dominance. And who are you going to go with? Who are you going to align with? Because if you go with one, then by definition, you're not with the other. So for this prime minister, I think it's just as a consequence of her training and the experience that she's had, and you know, how she's been affiliated as a politician. She's a smart cookie. You know, I don't think this is something that's just an emotional decision that was made. It's something that's founded in politics and in policy and in geopolitics. So I don't have that much more to say about it.
Okay, thank you for that. And the question from Manabe-san, he asks, should we pay attention to any changes in study groups and expert forums after the election,
Yeah,
especially those led by the LDP or any bureaucrats?
yeah. Yeah, I think you're going to see so there's a vacuum that needs to be filled. Like you were saying with Nikai, Nikai is no longer the spokesman for attempting to guide Japan to have a better relationship with China. But that vacuum will be filled. You know, nature abhors a vacuum. Something will fill it. Maybe Hayashi Sensei will be that champion of the China brand. But similarly, um, uh, the faction system has died. It's no longer there, and there's a realignment that's waiting to take place. The Abe faction was by far almost 100% bigger than the next biggest faction, and that one just kind of disappeared. But you've got they're not quite Ronin, but I guess you could say they're Ronin, the former members of the Abe faction. Um, but all of the factions have kind of disappeared except for the Aso faction. Something needs to fill that and some kind of cohesion. It could be that Ms. Takaichi builds the LDP to fill that void, but also in line with that is the Benkyokai, the study groups. as Manabe-san points out. This is, number one, it's a force for generating funds for elections and also developing, a war chest for the party and for the individual Diet members. So there are some members that are really blessed with an articulate mouth. They have good speechwriters and they attract a lot of people. So the first point is developing, a war chest for funds coming in. But the second one is, and this program is an example of it, there's just so little opportunity for people to follow what's going on. How do you learn about it? How do you know what the policies are? If you don't read Japanese, the Japanese read Japanese, but even then, how do you get involved? How do you make your voice heard? How do you participate? And Benkyokai is a open door. You have to be vetted. You have to be invited. You have to kind of move into that. You have to pay for it. You have to pay, an entry fee and a participation fee. But it does give you insight into what's going on, what's important, what to participate in, and that sort of thing. So I follow it very carefully. I'm attending a lot of Benkyokai because it's like a PhD course in what's going on and how things are moving. And I encourage other people to pursue that to the degree that they can, but not everybody can. Everybody's busy. It's my business, so I can do it and justify it. But for a lot of other people, you can't rely on just the Japan Times or what you hear on the news about what's going on in Japanese politics and what it means to you and what the projections are. So it's really delicate. But I appreciate that people think that joining us weekly gives them some sense of where we're going with that, and that's our hope and my vision to provide that that insight to you. Sometimes I'm close to it, but most of the time I feel like I've failed the audience. But we're working on it. 5 years, you would think I'd be good at this by now, Maya.
Getting better, Timothy. Don't despair. Yes. Well, one more question from Peter Pan, and the question is: will Japan continue to contribute to the United Nations now that President Trump has pulled the plug from many United Nations projects?
How do I describe this? Japan is like a girl in high school, wants to be liked by everybody, doesn't want anybody to gossip about her, doesn't want to not be invited to the sleepovers. Um, it's hard to, deny Donald Trump what he wants. Um, Following in his footsteps or clapping at his moves and what he does and professes gets you a certain amount of leeway, not all the time, but it does generate some sort of affinity. So, yeah, leading up to the state visit, perhaps in March, that's just right around the corner. I mean, today is the 8th. March is, less than, 20 days away. It is 20 days away. So yeah, leading up to that, if push came to shove, yeah, I kind of doubt the Japanese would want to pull out of the UN. They're too much of a joining organ. The Japanese government's too much of a joining organization. It's not robust enough to fly by themselves. They want to be a member. They want to join. It's just like Japanese society in particular. There is a cohesion that is sought and actively engaged in. So I don't think the Japanese will put out of the UN. I think that would be a far stretch.
Right. Well, I'm with you on this one. And well, it looks like we have gone through the questions and comments today. To everybody who joined us, thank you so very much. And thank you for the congratulatory notes on the first episode of year 6. So it's a pleasure to be with you once again. Remember, Wednesday, February 11th, we are going to have Mr. Glenn Fukushima with us on the podcast at 8 in the morning. That's Wednesday morning, 8 o'clock. And we'll be once again here next Sunday at 8:20 when Timothy will probably, I don't know, Timothy, are you going to be on your beautiful boat or are you going to... We don't know that yet. Okay.
Like I said, February is the coldest month of the year.
Yes.
Although we want to prepare for March as the sailing season begins. Yeah, February's tough. It's tough to spend that much time in when it's cold and it's wet and it's snowing. Yeah. I'll probably be reporting from. What's that?
My daughter just brought a small snowman from
Oh my gosh!
the balcony outside. Yes, here. Sorry to interrupt you with this. She just made this for us. Yes. Yeah, I wanted to show it to everybody because this is the first snow in Tokyo, and it is going to get deeper. I can see that now we've got like maybe 6 or 7 centimeters here already. Timothy, I apologize
On
for
election day, isn't that something?
it. Is indeed. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you, and have a great day. Please vote if you have the right to vote. If you are a native Japanese person or naturalized Japanese, do not miss this chance. And let's see what happens tonight. We'll be back again on next Sunday. Thanks a lot and have a great week as well.
Thanks, Maya. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody. See you
Timothy.
next week.
See you next week.